All right, Jake, third time is a charm. After many technical difficulties, we're going to give this another shot. It's been a long time since we recorded anything, posted anything. I moved to Florida at the end of August, and things have been a little hectic, but they're finally starting to settle down, and you're still in Montana. And yeah, lots happened in my world. I think that it's like Joe Hudson says often when you stop looking for things is when you find them. And I just think that what I really have been searching for most of my adult life and what many of these videos at the end of the day have been about, I found. So I'm excited to get into that. I think that moving forward as we pick things back up, there's going to be much more clarity and cohesiveness. And even when we do jump around into other topics, I think that one of the things you and I talked about many times is like, what's the through line? And I think that I finally know what the through line is, and I'm excited to share that, and hopefully it's helpful for other people. And so, didn't expect to start this back up just yet because I'm not actually in my office, but I'm in this junky office right now, but my new office won't be done for another month or month and a half. But you sent me a text the other day, and I might have answered it one way before all this stuff has happened, but after what I've gone through and some of the things I've been processing through, I'm like, I think I would answer that very different. So maybe Jake would be open to just, hey, let's turn the video camera back on and let's hit record and let's see if this is helpful to him and hopefully helpful to anybody who might watch or listen to this. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're here. And yeah, how are you doing?
Oh, good. Very good. Yeah, just busy. Life is crazy as always, but yeah, listening to that quote that you said Joe Hudson would say, it definitely hits for sure because, we've both been living our lives. We both have a lot of craziness going on, and I've had questions brought up and shot you a text or, sit and simmer on it myself. And, you know, hearing that you got some light shed on it, it's pretty exciting. So yeah, no, definitely excited to talk about it. And that text that I sent you, um, I I sat on it for a while and definitely excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so I think with that, I'd say let's jump right in and maybe you can just share with me again what it was and maybe some of the context and see where we go from there.
Yeah, well, when I texted you that, it was actually after a conversation I had with my wife, and we were just got done with hanging out with some friends, and the husband, he was just a really well put together guy, recent new friends, and we got in some conversations about politics and stuff like that, and I just really admired the way that he spoke, the way he held himself. He was very poignant, and I asked him, I was like, what makes you act the way you do? Because that's an admirable quality. For sometimes for me, I'm like, I wish I had more of that abode per se. And he he was like, if I'm going to be honest, it's because I'm a former Marine. They taught me that in Marines. And I was like, wow, that makes so much sense now. And then I started thinking about that more and more, and thinking about the reason why he's saying he's this way is because he was a former Marine and he learned these skills being a Marine. And then I started thinking about it more and more, and the qualities I admire in other people, one of them being you, and thought about the way you're so organized, and the way you take that, you can organize and parse information really fast, that's an admirable quality for you. And then I thought about like the conversations we've had, and the experiences you've had that make you that person. So I started thinking about, is it required to go through those experiences? Is that kind of a prerequisite to get the admirable qualities that I would like to adapt myself?
So like, would you, if I'm hearing you right, the question is basically like, is there a way to become like a Marine without having to go through what a Marine goes through to become a Marine?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So you sent me that. You sent me that in a text, and I think I responded with a few things that I'll maybe try and summarize here. But I think that for me, so much of my journey as an adult, and so many of the things that I've tried and the things that I've shared have really come down to like, what's the point? I went back. I was telling you before we got on here. I went back. The last 6 years of my life has been totally insane, and not in a bad way, just very hectic and busy. And my digital life got so cluttered, and so in the last few weeks, I've spent, I don't even know, 3 days, probably 2 or 3 days of my spare time just reorganizing my digital life. 5,000, 6,000 files reorganizing, so I feel like I know what the heck's going on again. And in doing that, I spent some time looking at some old journal entries, and man, I just realized it's like so much of my wrestle as an adult has really just come down to like, what the hell am I here for? Like, what is the point of all of it? I almost feel like when Solomon in Ecclesiastes, he's like, everything under the sun is vanity. What is the point of all that we're doing? And so the reason I bring that up is to say that I think the question I would start with back to you is, like, what is the purpose, or what is the allure, or what is the value that you see in wanting to adopt, whether it's organization or carrying yourself in a specific way? Or I think that you had mentioned this guy is, he's into politics, and he's got like his political views dialed in, and the way he communicates them are clear, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, whether that's good or bad, right or wrong, the question I think we have to start with, because what I realized is everything that I've been wrestling with, like I went through the Jamie Winship program, and it was so helpful to me, and yet it didn't answer the question, because I realized, and he might disagree with me on this, and that's fine, but at least in my brain, what I realize is, like, everything flows downstream from your purpose. And when I say purpose, I don't mean like the esoterical way we think about it in America today. I mean the simplistic way that word, what it actually means, which is, what was something created for? So what was I created for? What is the purpose of this thing, this life, whatever? And the way that I articulate it is, if you think of a hammer, okay, the identity of a hammer being a hammer does not matter if you don't first know what a hammer was created for. A hammer was created to hit a nail and to pull a nail. And if you try and screw in a screw with a hammer, it's not going to work very well. But if you don't know the purpose of the hammer, then it doesn't really matter that the hammer has the identity of a hammer. And so for me, it's like learning my identity, or understanding identity, is super important and super valuable and super powerful and necessary. But for me, the question was, for what purpose? Like, so that what? And so I think that we got to start with, if you think through what you're wrestling through, and I think this is what I kind of responded to you in the text, in the brief response that I had, was, it all comes down to, what were you created for, and why do you think that adopting these things will help you become more of what you were created to become? Because I think everything else is going to flow downstream from that question.
Yeah, that's really good. I know in past conversations I remember you asked me straight up one time, you were like, what do you think your purpose is? And, for a second I kind of stumbled, and I can't remember the answer that I gave you. It was a little while ago, but, after thinking on that now, and after what you just said, I think of, one of my purposes is to create. And he made us in his image, right? And he's a creator, and he's the almighty creator. And I think one of my purposes is to create. And so when I think of a tool, right? When I think of the hammer and the nail, I think of, for me, why I would want to learn those skills is to be the most effective tool in creating. So in creating for him and creating for that purpose, I'd like to be the most effective tool in that sense, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I'll ask you, so that what? So let's say that you adopt these things, and you're an amazingly effective tool, and you're amazing at whatever the tool is supposed to do. But what's the point of whatever the thing that the tool is supposed to do?
That's what I think is the part that I'm struggling with, is, for this scenario, what would be my nail? If I'm a hammer, what would be my nail? That's the part that I feel like I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Exactly, and I think that that's the part that, frankly, like, the more that, it's like, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and the more that I dive into this and I lean into this, the more that I just see it everywhere, and I see our collective lack of understanding and all the ramifications of not fully understanding. And what I mean by that is when I say what was a hammer created for, it's really easy. It's like, oh, well, it was created to hit a nail and to pull a nail. And then I say, but what were humans created for? And it's like you get all these different answers. And some Christian people would say we were made to glorify God, which is true. They would say we were made to know and be known by God, which is true. But I think that there's an even more simplistic answer that applies to each and every one of us, that when we see it clearly, then we start to see it in every single aspect of our life, of the world, of how we do everything. And what that is see, and so I've coined it, I call it undisputed purpose. Because I have found in my life what happens is I have competing purposes even though I don't know it. And on one hand, like think of the two angels on the shoulders and think
Right.
they're two purposes. On one shoulder, there's a purpose that revolves around me. Like my purpose in my life is to get what I want. Okay? And then there's this other purpose on my other shoulder that's like, yes, but that's not what you were made for. You weren't made for yourself. So then it begs the question, well, what were you made for? And the answer, according to the Bible, is we were made for his image. So that's why when you go into the New Testament, it says, if you want to follow me, if you want to be my disciple, you have to lay down your life. That's why it says you have to put off the old man and you have to put on the new man. If you do a word study and you just look up the word image in the Old Testament, and then you look up in the Hebrew, and then you look up the word image in the Greek in the New Testament, it is mind-blowing, because what you realize is the thing that God would get the most angry about is when we would worship an image that we made with our hands. Okay? Why? Because we weren't made for that. We weren't made for another image. We weren't made for ourselves as the image. We were made for his image, right? And so, how does that matter in terms of what we're talking about? This is what I would say. When you think about you becoming the tool, and you think, what's the purpose of the tool? The purpose of the tool is to be used to bear and to reflect and to proliferate God's image. Right? So this is what's been so mind-blowing to me is even in my own life I've realized like, oh, there's been so many times where my ambition or my drive or my organization or my ability to use my words or whatever these things are that God gifted me with, where I use those to pursue the me purpose at the expense of his image. When what I was created for was to lay down, was to kill this one, so that I could use all those things, all those tools as we're talking about, to actually project his image into the world. So here's my point. My point is that you can be the best, most organized person in the world, but if you're not, if that's not equating to everything that you do, everything that you touch, projecting God's image into the world, then it was for nothing. That's why, like, my question in all these notes that I kept finding, I would find it sporadically here and there, was to what end? Like, to what end? To what end to make the money or to build the business or to do this or to do that? It's like, to what end? And it's like, oh, now I have the answer. The end is to show God's image. That's it. And and here's the thing, it's impossible to do that when his image is in competition with our selfishness.
That's interesting. So, just clarifying, I guess for me, I feel like when I think of to bring for his image, you're saying for his image, that's our purpose. And I guess if you could define that, I guess, for his image, what in terms, if you were speaking to a 12-year-old, because in turn for me, I'm relatively new in my faith. I'm still like, it feels like it's there's so much nuance and it ebbs
Right.
and flows of how I see it. If you were to explain it to a 12-year-old, how would you explain his image?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the Bible answers it really well. It says that Jesus is the physical representation of the invisible God. Jesus is the picture. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What is he saying? He's saying, you want an image? Just look at me, right? So that's why, and the Bible says that God is love, okay? Well, what does the Bible say love is? Well, we know that perfect love casts out fear. So if you're walking around afraid, are you showing the world? Are you bearing his image? No, because you're not walking in love. If you're walking around, it says love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not rude, it doesn't seek its own, it keeps no records of wrongs, it hopes all things, believes all things, bears all things, it never fails, it never ends. So if we're not walking around in those, then are we walking in his image? Are we bearing his image? No. And this is the crazy part. The crazy part is like, we don't even think it's possible. Most of us don't think that to walk that way is actually possible. And that's why it's so difficult for us sometimes to read, like the book of James, where it says, if you keep on or if you sin, then he is there to advocate on your behalf. And we think, what do you mean? Like most people think, I already sinned by 9:00, right? Because most of us have. So here's the kicker. The kicker is like, we can't do it in our own strength. That's why he sent the Holy Spirit, right? He sent the Holy Spirit to say, okay, and this is the part that's wild to me. It's like, what happened when we sinned in the beginning? Well, our ability to bear his image, the way that we were created and intended to bear his image, was broken. See, in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 26, it says, let us make man, or like humankind, in our image and in our likeness. So image is like, if you look up the words, as far as I understand them, image is like, imagine an idol or crafted after or formed after, and likeness is more like how you walk, how you live, how you do the thing. So image and likeness. Well, when we sinned, something in that, our ability to do that was broken. Now, in that verse in Genesis, it says, in our image, in our likeness, and then right after that he said, and we're going to give them dominion. We want them to rule over this. And so, like, I always think in story, when I think about talking to a kid, it's like, here's the story of the Bible. God created the earth, and he wanted a family, a royal family, and he wanted them to expand his kingdom. He wanted the kingdom on earth to look visibly the way that it looks invisibly in heaven. And so he created all of this with an image in mind. And our job was to bear that image on the earth as his ambassadors to a degree, his related ambassadors. And when we sin, we broke our ability to do that. But then when Jesus came and he died and he rose again, he restored our ability to walk in his image. That's why, like in Romans, it talks about being conformed to what? To the image of his son. And then in Colossians, again, it talks about being made new in the image of Christ. Because what he's doing is he's helping us to see that what he paid the price for, what he died and rose again for, wasn't just so that we could go to heaven someday. It was so that the image we were created for in the beginning could be restored. And so if you think about like, and this is where for me it's been so powerful, and I hopefully I'm conveying it in a way that makes any sense, but it's like, think about when you're in a conversation with somebody and you feel yourself starting to get frustrated. It's like, well, if you lash out in frustration, is that his image? Or is that you and the me on the shoulder saying like, no, this is about me and what I want? Because most of the time, we spend a lot of our lives letting this purpose, right, the world revolving around me, dictate how we behave. As opposed to saying, oh, God made me new. He made me in a way where I don't have to be a slave to myself, to my own desires anymore, because I was made for something more. I was made for his image, and his image doesn't do those kinds of things. And so for me, what it's really been doing is like, I've heard, and we've even talked about it before, it's like be, do, have. You be it first, and when you're being it, you do it, and when you do it, you have it. Instead of a do to be, you be to do. And it sounds good, but it's like, but how do you actually do that? Right. And what I've found through this whole process is, well, it starts by knowing, one, what your purpose is. Why are you here? What were you created to become, to be? Because once you start to accept that in your life, once you start to believe that it's possible, then as you become that, the doing just comes along for the ride, so to speak. So like, the reason I share all that is because at the core of what I think your text message question to me was, or is how do I do the things that I think I'm supposed to do in order to be the person I want to be. And what I'm saying is, no, I think it's when you realize that your purpose, everywhere you go, in everything you do, is to show the world God's image, is to bear his image. Then the things that that person who's doing that needs to do will just come as a result of him becoming that person. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it does. It does. What I'm thinking about is basically, if I can summarize it, it would be, for somebody who's unfamiliar with the image of God, it would be, diving into scripture and learning basically more and more about how Jesus lived his life, as well as feel like how to communicate with the Spirit, et cetera, as the foundation of your house, basically. And then if I'm getting this correct, our God-given unique ability per se would be kind of the way that we take action towards that.
Yeah, kind of. Let's say for like somebody who's not a Christian, it probably the simplest way to say it is, which is what makes it so impossible if you're not a Christian, is it comes down to dying to what you want. Like, I realize, oh my gosh, this is why so much of the business advice is so hard for me, and so much of the money advice is so hard for me, because like every time I hear it, at its core, it's all self-focused. It's all self-centered. And the reason that our country and our world is in the mess that it is because we live that way. So we sacrifice his image at the expense of what we want, or on the altar of what we want. And it's supposed to be the exact opposite. We're supposed to be willing to sacrifice what we want at the altar of his image. And I've realized, like, oh my gosh, I've seen where I've done that in my life. I've seen where those things have tripped me up. And I realized, like, the reason that it tripped me up is because I was doing things, really, when it came down to it at the end of the day, for what I wanted. I had this conversation the other day with somebody who is actually not a believer, and he said, yeah, but Zach, like, you got to do some things you want. Like, you got to be able to eat, you got to be able to pay the bills, you got to be all those things. So it's like, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. The only time it's wrong to do those things is if it's at the expense of his image, right? Like, what is sin? Sin is falling short. Falling short of what? Of his image. Like, everything to me is coming down to. So think about this. I was thinking about this the other day. Why is our current monetary system so broken? Why is it making rich people richer and poor people poorer? And why is it tearing our whole country apart? Why is inflation ravaging families? Oh, because our money isn't in his image. Like, part of God's image in the Bible is he tells us how to govern ourselves. And he tells us one thing that he's really against. And what he's really against is unjust scales. Well, what is a monetary system where you can just print money out of thin air? Where you can steal the average man or the average woman's hard-earned money for their labor. Right? That's an unjust scale. That's an uneven weighted scale, right? That's manipulation, and he hates that, right? And so when we think about how do we govern ourselves, how do we run a business, how do we run a family, how do we respond to persecution, how do we respond to people who hate us? It's like, oh, well, if we want to know how to do it right, yes, exactly like you said, the answer is in the Bible, because the only way that we see what his image look like, which is his original intent, his original design for us, for why we're here, is to know what he said about it in his word. So it's like, listen, being organized is fantastic. Some people are like naturally, inherently, insanely organized. And some people are naturally, inherently, and insanely unorganized, but they're very creative. And they both bring, right? They both bring value to the table, because what we know about God is he's not usually either or, he's usually both and. And so what we know is that God is a creator. He created us to create. He made us to make, right? So there's a creative aspect to what we want to do, what we were put here to do, the multiplication that we were created to create. And at the same time, he also put us here to create order, to order his creation. So on one hand, you have the creators, and on the other hand, you have the organizers. Sometimes people can do both, but the point of the matter is, when we're here doing what he created us to do in his image. We are both creating and we're organizing. We're creating order out of chaos. That's why, like, when I look around to the political situation, the thing that's like, think about all the hot button political issues that we're dealing with right now. And if we just asked ourselves just one question, what would his image look like in this situation? It becomes a lot easier to start answering the questions, right? A lot easier. Because on one hand, God has his image in a person that is Jesus. But also on the other hand, God has his image on government, on rulers, on how he wants things to be set up, on money, on all these things. And all those answers are in our Bible because he put us here to bear his image while we had dominion. And right now what we're doing is we're having dominion outside of his image, and it's really not working very well. Sorry, that was a long rant. I went a whole bunch of different places, but
Oh no, that's good. It leads really well in my next sort of question that's making me think about it. You brought up a lot. You brought up politics. You brought up our monetary system. You brought up a lot of things that everybody's living in right now, at least in the United States. And I guess the question I have for you would be, you know, how do you personally, how do you feel like you stay focused on him? How do you walk on water and stay looking at him? Right? That I understand that probably the answer is in the Bible, but if you could kind of summarize that, because in this world that it feels like, to if I'm understanding right, I would have to let myself die to basically be able to, let's say, get financially free from where I'm at, right? Or feel like I would like to get a promotion at work or anything like that, what normal people deal with on a day to day. How do you stay focused on him even though there's all of this going on around you?
yeah, well, and I think isn't that the crux of modern day Christianity in so many ways, which is like, I think what I'm hearing you say is, how can I pursue financial freedom, or how can I pursue getting a promotion and moving up in my career at the same time as I die to myself? Is that what you're essentially saying?
Well, yeah. So I think I know the answer, really. I mean, you said it right there. I would have to die to myself. I would have to um, really go beyond what I would expect. It's like the surface level would be like I wouldn't desire money anymore, but necessarily money for the reason that I would consider, oh, I want to be financially free. I would need to desire money to, like you said, create more or create organization or hold dominion, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think as it relates, so I don't think that the answer is that you have to say, I don't desire money anymore, because I don't I, because God created money. In Genesis, I think it's 8 times God talks about money, gold, silver, etc. God created money. So if God created it, it can't inherently be bad.
Mm,
I think where we have to shift our focus, where we have to shift the way we think about things, is we get so focused on what we want as opposed to what we give. Right?
mm,
So one way to think about it is, I want to get a promotion in my career, and most of the time we want a promotion in our career because, one, we want to make more money, and then two, like, we want more influence, we want more responsibility, we want more trust. So instead of making the promotion the thing that we're pursuing, what we should be pursuing, as far as I see it, is instead what kind of value that person would have to be creating for other people, so that the inherent byproduct would be the thing that that person is desiring. So the question is, if you really want the promotion and you really want to make more money, well, then let's say you're making, I don't know, $100,000 a year now, and you want to make $200,000 a year. Well, then how can you provide twice as much value as you're providing right now? Right?
mm,
See, I think that we get it so backwards, and this is why it gets bastardized. Because then what we end up doing, what we tend to do as humans, with the me purpose on our shoulder, as opposed to the his image purpose, is we literally will then find ways to justify things that we otherwise would not do to get to the goal we're pursuing, because the ultimate goal is the goal we're pursuing instead of his image. There's nothing wrong with getting paid more. There's nothing wrong with a promotion, right? But I promise you, and this is how my journey landed me here, I truly believe. Every single place I went, everything I accomplished, all throughout my life, I would get there and I would say, huh, this doesn't feel any different.
Mm.
And it's not because I was like pursuing some horrible, like I wasn't doing anything horrible or bad or whatever. But it's like I was pursuing these things thinking, well, when I get to this thing, then I'll feel differently or I'll experience this differently. And then you get there and you're like, oh, well, it's not any different. And what I was really searching for the whole time is like, what am I here for? And how am I going to find that? Because only when I find that and when I know that I'm living for the purpose I was created, will I feel fulfilled. Like fulfilled, filled to the full. Well, if you're not living for the thing you were created for, you're never going to feel full, never going to fully be filled. And no amount of money, and no amount of accolades, and no amount of recognition, notoriety, fame, fortune, none of that will fill you full. Because you can only be filled full by living for your purpose, which is His image. And so for me, it's not that I'm here to try and convince people to stop pursuing all the things they're pursuing. What I'm here to do is hopefully help us to see that if we don't pursue them for the right reason, the right purpose, then even when we achieve them, we will still feel empty or partially empty or mostly empty because we had the wrong telos, we've talked about that word, the wrong aim, the wrong end goal in mind from the start. And that's why, like, when I look around at the world, I go, oh, it's not working very well. Because we weren't made for ourselves. He didn't make us for us. He made us for His image. He didn't put us on the earth so that we could make sure people knew who we are and how great we are and all the things we're good at and all that stuff. He made us to show whoever He was going to show, heavenly beings or whatever, like what His image looks like manifested on the earth. And every time we sacrifice that for the thing that we want, for this other purpose on our shoulder, we feel unfulfilled, and it's because our spirit deep down knows that's not what I was created for.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, it makes me think about that there's some statistic out there that says that it's like 8 or 9 out of 10 lottery winners end up being broke after,
Exactly.
after having it. So
Broke and miserable. Not just broke, but broke and more miserable than when they started.
yeah.
And so I think, like, if we go back to the very beginning of all this, somebody watching or listening to this might be like, wow, how did that come out of that simple question? But for me, I think because it helps me to reframe even the questions that I'm trying to find answers to, which is, you asked about focus. How do you stay focused? And I think for me, the answer has been, as I think about something I'm going to pursue or something I'm going to do or something I'm going to try or something that I'm going to pay attention to, the question I'm asking is this going to help me bear His image more, better, more fully, right? Because here's the deal. Here's what I've learned. Because most of the time the answer is no. Let me back up. It's not necessarily that it's no. It's that just like in investing, it comes down to knowing how to allocate capital. You have to allocate capital in the areas that's going to generate the highest risk-adjusted return. It's the same thing in life. We have to allocate time. We have to allocate energy. And so what I've found is there have been many things as I've gone through this process where normally I would have like maybe listened to a podcast or I don't know, read a book or whatever. And instead what I find, like today, I went for a walk for like an hour and I was just praying. And instead of praying, like in the past, I can remember so many times where I would pray and I'd say, like, God, could you just make me this way? Could you help me with this thing I'm struggling with? Could you like change this about me? And I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore because what I think that I see in my Bible is I think that what I see in my Bible is Him saying, I already did that, but do you believe it? See, I don't think when they ask if we believe, I don't think they're just asking, do we believe that Jesus lived on the earth, that He is God, that He was born of a virgin, that He died, that He rose again, and that He's in heaven. I don't think that's the complete picture of the question of belief. I think part of the question of belief is also, do you believe that you're a new man? Do you believe that I see you as if you've never sinned? Do you believe that the things that I say you can do through the power of my Spirit, you can actually do? Do you believe that you can live the way that I've called you to live? Because I think for most of my life, I didn't. I think most of my life I was reading my Bible and I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. It seems impossible. And then there's a whole bunch of like guilt and shame and condemnation and frustration that comes along with that. And then you just identify more with the old sin man, the old sin nature, than you do the redeemed and restored new man, new nature. And I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. So even if I still am struggling with this thing, I can still say, Lord, thank you that you made me new. Thank you that you've given me power over that thing. Thank you that I hate that thing. And thank you that you're making it to where that thing's not going to exist in my life anymore. Thank you that you're changing me. Thank you that you're making me who I was created to be, to do what you created me to do. Right? Because that's a totally different position. That's a totally different motivation. It's not fear and shame and condemnation. It's thankfulness and gratefulness and joy. Like how can you become his image? How can you bear his image if you identify more with the old sin nature than you do with the newly restored, redeemed, and justified nature? And so for me, like, as you could probably tell as I talk, it has just helped to make sense of so many things, of everything in my life, like literally everything. That now when I look at all the things that are happening and people ask me questions about how do we deal with this and what do we do about that, the question is simply, well, what would his nature look like in that situation?
Yeah, I think if I could summarize what I see, it seems like looking at from the outside in, I almost see like a heart shift or a heart posture shift from where you're positioning it in the sense that you said, I don't want to be against everything, that I don't want to go get to the point and then realize that what's it all for, what's next. It's a thankfulness that you're there in the first place, and it's a gratefulness that you're here and living and breathing and able to live out his image. And to me, I see that as like absolutely warm. It's a different sense of fuel. We've talked about this a lot in the past. It feels like a lot of the guru culture, and a lot of, especially in the business community, it seems like there's a lot of the do and then receive, and instead of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. But this is a different sense of fuel. It's a different sense of fire in your belly. I can even see it just talking right now, and it's pretty amazing, really.
Yeah, well, it's been awesome. Journey's just starting. We could probably maybe wrap up here. I will say, if you're watching this, you're listening to this, and maybe you have felt like I have felt, and you're checking off every goal that you've made, and you're getting to the next level, and you're thinking, man, it's like something's off, it doesn't feel any different. What I'd like to invite you to do is you could go to my website, kosturos.com, kosturos.com. And at least for the time being, I don't know how long I'll be able to do this, but you can book a call, and I'd love to actually have a call with you, like what me and Jake are doing right now, and maybe just walk through some of these things, because I look around at what we're experiencing in the world today, and I think, man, like Jesus came and he died and he rose again because what he was paying the price for was not just for us to go to heaven someday. It was actually to empower us to walk in who we were created to be in the beginning, and to walk out the dominion mandate that he gave us in the beginning, the way he intended it in the beginning. And I think, man, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved. There's a lot of creative solutions that need to be created. And I think people who are walking with his image as their undisputed purpose, the reason that they're here, the thing that they're pursuing, I think can be the ones that help to bring some of those solutions to fruition, because ultimately that's, to me, at least as I read the Bible, what his dominion is supposed to look like. And so I want to have conversations with people who are like, I know that something's off in the guru culture. I know that something's off in the business culture. I know that maybe even something's been off in my life, and I want to live for what I was created for. I want to live for that undisputed purpose. I'd love to have a conversation with you. You can check it out. You can book a call. It's totally free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to help other people on a journey, the same journey that I've been on. So if you like that, head to the website, check it out. If not, if you found this helpful, we'd love if you'd share it with a friend. Share it with somebody who you think could benefit from the things we've talked about. Uh, Hit the like button if you liked it, and we'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. We'd love to continue this journey, and hopefully it grows and reaches more people over time. So, with that, I will shut up, and Jake, I'll let you close us out here.
Yeah, I really am so appreciative of the eye-opening experiences that you're having recently. And, honestly, I just pray for the people listening to hopefully have some wisdom and be able to glean something off of what we talked about, and serious opportunity being able to talk to you one-on-one, because, you're basically doing what I'm asking. My original question was, how can I learn these skills? And it's you're able to sit here and talk with somebody who's had a lot of experiences and be able to maybe provide an alternative outlook than what you're already looking at. So yeah, really appreciate it, Zach. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys next time.